What is up, everyone? Welcome to Mock Draft Monday. It is your guy TCR, and I am joined by a couple guests who I'm really happy to have here with me. I am joined by Ashton, who is a Rams YouTuber, podcaster, who I did a collab with a while back, and then also our good friend Marcus Labrada of the Redbird Reboot podcast that is featured here on TCR. Gentlemen, how are you doing? Let's start with you, Ashton. Say hi and tell us how you're doing today.
Doing great. Besides the huge storm outside hitting the entire East Coast, it is fun time here in Virginia. Going between 80 degrees and 30 degrees one day to another. So if I'm a little rough sounding, it's because my sinuses are just giving me haywire messages and stuff, and been a little crazy out here.
I've had that myself too, and I'm on the East Coast, so we've got a good thunderstorm through this morning. So yeah, Marcos, how are you, my friend?
Well, I'm gonna be praying for the guys at the you guys in the East Coast because I heard that you guys had a tornado warning somewhere in the mid East Pacific area, probably around like Washington or Virginia and whatnot. So, are you guys hopefully none of this ends up in a crazy like EF4 or EF5 tornado or whatnot. It's just like a little bit of a warning. But anyways, we hit 91 degrees here in Phoenix, so we're kind of happy with that. Kind of. I mean, it's first day of 91 degrees, so yay, woohoo. 100 coming around the corner.
Well, Ashton's in Virginia, so here's hoping there's no sirens during our live stream. Yeah, so well, I'm glad to have you both with us. We're here to do Mock Draft Monday, which is what we do every year, talking, preparing about, getting to know the draft classes, talking about the Cardinals, preparing for the draft, we're gonna also quickly talk about some quick free agents that were signed today and a few other things. But real quick, before we get started, I wanted to ask Ashton to share his insights on our new head coach, Mike LaFleur, because obviously he was the offensive coordinator with the Rams. And, so it's always helpful and interesting to hear the perspectives from people who watched him, his team and his coaching week in and week out. So give us maybe just a quick synopsis of your thoughts on Mike LaFleur and what we should look for with him as our coach.
I would say first off, the Rams were coming off of that brutal 2022 season following our Super Bowl win in 21. And that was mired with a lot of injuries, a lot of issues. We ended up canning the OC, would later end up becoming the Jags head coach, funny enough. But he ended up going to Kentucky. We wanted to retool our running game because that was a big issue for 3 or 4 years. And
Okay.
then comes in Mike LaFleur from the Jets. He was fired from the Jets. I think we all know how much of a kind of dumpster fire that organization has been in the last 5 or 6 years. He comes in and we basically were still operating a zone kind of running scheme, and we slowly start transitioning away from that for a myriad of reasons, mostly because of the roster and McVay trying to innovate and trying to figure out a way to kind of stop this single high shell defense that has kind of taken the league by storm after Brandon Staley kind of invented it or made it popular, so to say, in 2020. So basically, we bring in Mike LaFleur. He hasn't really called plays for us, so I think that's one thing to note. He's only called one game, and that was the end of 2 years ago. Uh, I believe that was the Seahawks game with Jimmy G. So if you want to go watch tape of him actually calling game, that is the one Rams game where he called against the starters of the Seahawks, almost beat them too. Probably should have won that game, but for the most part, I think he is very energetic, a great communicator, and he's been under what I would say has been one of the best generational coaches with Sean McVay. So I do think it's a good hire. I think I mentioned this to you guys before we came live. It was a little interesting. You guys did not move on from your GM and your front office. So I am kind of curious to see who kind of has more power in that dynamic there, the GM or your new head coach, and what direction they can go, because this roster has a lot of places you can go with it, and it's not exactly contending this next year.
Yeah, and it's GMs usually get more time than coaches. Whether that's fair or not, or right or not, or smart or not, is up for debate. But that's usually what happens. I'm still more optimistic about the work our GM has done than some people are. I do have some critiques, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to say. And you make a good point. There's a lot of directions to go with the roster. There's some young players with some potential that I think are going to take a step forward. But when you look at the roster, and we were talking about this before in the live as well, with what they've done in free agency, what they've done in free agency has not like given us clarity on what they're going to do in the draft. Really, what they've done is they've signed guys that could start if they need them to, but are not so good that they can't draft a guy to start over them. Right? That's so like they put themselves in a position to be able to take best player available for the most part, which in a lot of ways is good, but doesn't make figuring out what they're going to do for the draft easier, right? Real quick, I'm going to add a couple folks, and then maybe Marcos give you a minute if you want to add anything in your thoughts on LaFleur. I know you've talked about it on your podcast. But we got Clasinassi coming in doing he's got the Gardecki emoji that's not really showing up on the image there. But then we got Chris Young, mock draft money time, and he has words for Ashton. You can only say positive things. We can't take any negativity. Don't steal any hope we have about LaFleur. So, yeah, Marcos, what do you want? Maybe just a quick minute. Your thoughts, on LaFleur.
All right, so this was a top guy that I was thinking going into the offseason after we had disposed of Jonathan Gannon. And so the reason why I was thinking about it that way is because I knew that we'd had no shot of getting the offensive coordinator from the Seattle Seahawks, Clint Kubiak, that he was going to take a higher, not higher paying job, but a higher, ranking job in his mind because he's trying to get success. He's trying to have a successful offense and a good organization. And not to say too much about the Raiders and saying the direction they've gone, we can't compare that to what the Cardinals and the Cardinals position was. So from the very get-go, I thought to myself, this is the guy that we need to hire. Regardless of what you think about him, play calling and everything else wise and whatnot, it's a scheme that I was thinking could be, implemented in this with this organization going forward, because he's taking a lot of what Sean McVay is teaching them, a lot of that playbook, a lot of the philosophies, and I really do like the direction that they are going, because defenses have caught up. As we saw versus the Patriots, the Seahawks implemented their heavy, light personnel. Even their defensive tackle, or the nose tackle, that you could say Byron Murphy Jr., he is a lighter version of a true nose tackle, but they're experimenting and using him and Leonard Davis in a way where they can stop the run with their light hybrid feeling sides, and they have so many hybrid positions on their team that it really is an interchangeable duty. So obviously, forget what the guy number 3 is. What his name is. It starts with an N. He's their big nickel guy, and then of course they have Witherspoon on the other side. Those guys interchangeably change the duties because both of them play the apex position, and so in order to combat that, they're going right back to 13 personnel. They're going right back to heavier sets. They're going right back to doing creative stuff like, hey, insert routes from the backfield. People think they're going to block. No, they're actually running a route. Puka Nacua did that very well. So not to do too much or whatnot and everything like that, I think LaFleur bringing that philosophy over to the Cardinals is definitely something I wanted to go to.
And I think there's a good track record of offensive coordinators from McVay going on to be head coaches. You referenced one, Liam Cohen, and not all of them called plays with the Rams. But
none of them did.
Yeah, I think some of them played called them part time. I believe more than us if you go all the way back in the track record. But what they brought with them, as Marcos has pointed out, is a system, right? And so listen, there's for most coaches that are hired, you can make an argument for why they will or won't work. Some people want an experienced head coach and don't like the LaFleur hire. I do like the hire because I think there's a good track record in the league of finding good offensive coordinators from good teams and having them be successful. They don't all work out, but there's a pretty good track record. So I liked it as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. We're gonna talk about a couple of different things before we get in the mock draft. So really, we're going to talk real quick is some free agent moves that were made. Now, there's, Cardinals, we talked about, I mentioned this before, they've signed a lot of free agents that don't necessarily wow you and don't necessarily uh, preclude them from drafting players at that position, but they have got some guys I think add some nice depth. And one of the guys that they signed two players just today that I'm going to mention quickly. They signed Jack Gibbons, a linebacker who played with the Patriots. I've got a quick shot of his PFF grades. I won't go into depth there, but you see some green and yellow, which you like to see. So this is, this I think this is kind of the replacement for Davis Gaither, so to speak, a depth linebacker with some playing experience, a guy who can be part of the rotation. But if they drafted a guy who's an upgrade, there's room for that guy to kind of get some snaps. I like this signing. I think it's a nice, solid depth linebacker to add with Simon and Mac Wilson Jr. as a part of rotation. I think it makes our linebacker room better. I don't think this is necessarily a guy you want to be your long-term starter, but this could be a guy that could be part of the rotation. The other guy they signed, I'm not as bullish on, Andrew Billings, who's a defensive lineman, a little bit older. He had a really bad year. He was with the Bears. He played on a playoff team, but you see his grade was in the 30s. He's had a couple years where his grades were better in the 60s or 70s. He's been up and down. But his last 3 years haven't been his best. And, he's a depth guy, in a defensive line room that does need some depth. But not super bullish on this signing. But these are a couple guys they have added to the depth on the roster. Real quick, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. Ashton, do you have any thoughts about either of these players?
If you go back to the linebacker, I do think he was one of the linebackers coming off of Patriots. Really, I would say their defense was a little underrated. I thought they were better than people gave them credit for. He was someone who I thought was decent in coverage, so maybe he could grow there, especially with run stopping. That's something you guys really needed coming off of. I think you guys were bottom 10 on stopping the run, so potentially he could help fill in gaps there in the run game. But also, I did want to point out there were really only three teams that put up big numbers against this really elite Seahawks defense. It was the Rams twice, and then also the Bucks, also off of the Sean McVay tree. So I do think with you guys hiring LaFleur and bringing in that system is able, with what they were doing with 12 personnel, 11 personnel, having dynamic playmakers that can kind of play like tight ends, that can play like wide receivers, and wide receivers that can play like tight ends. You can kind of take advantage of some of those lighter boxes that Seattle's trying to perfect or run, basically.
Yeah. Marcos, quick, any thoughts on these two signings, real quick?
I'm kind of upset with the ADG situation because he was, and I watched this guy on a down by down basis. Obviously, I do a lot of studying on the defensive side. He was a really good run stopping, the like linebacker, and people would make the case of like, oh well, he sucks, he can't cover, he can't do this. I'm like, do you think any of linebackers that we've had in the past 5 years are either coverage gods or like run stopping gods? They're either one or the other, and most of the time they're neither. So to me, to lose ADG, to me, when it comes to like run stopping, it was really a bad hit. I've seen this guy read the run, hit the hole, stay balanced, and not let the running back just get like yardage going forward. And that's not something that I've seen from Cody Simon or from even Mac Wilson. Mac Wilson, of course, being given the title of like the best signing by Monty Austin for his. I like Mac Wilson. I do like what he gets to bring, but to me, he's more of like a Sam than like a Mike linebacker. And your Mike linebacker is now outside, just stopping the run in one direction. So I wish they would have kept ADG. They didn't. They cut him, and Jack Gibbons is now going to come in, and if he provides anything in the run game, or at least being able to defend any passes or whatnot, he's not a liability, then good. There is a upgrade there, but I think that they kind of screwed up by doing that. By the way, one game versus the Rams, they decided to take his snaps away, and they gave it to Owen Papo. I have no idea why.
Mm,
The Cardinals proceeded to give up 220 yards on, or 220, either it's 200 plus yards on the ground rushing,
mm,
and I couldn't help to notice that you had ADG covering for kick, or no, like doing kick duties, like either coverage or being one of the guys right there to, like, off of kickoffs, and I'm like, what's going on here? Do you guys not see what's going on? You don't want to stop the bleeding? No, it was
mm.
it was bad.
Yeah. Real quick, Austin, I put this up there. Austin likes the Gibbon signing, which I do as well. He thinks Gibbon signing is really nice. Fire. Real quick, Lorenzo Taptua, thanks for joining us, Professor. Hope to hear good names on Mock Draft Monday. I do hope we get Eli Heidenreich from Navy, right? That's one of my guys that I really like as well. Chris Young, got to figure quite a few of these recent signings will be practice squad guys. They might like the practice squad use of practice squad has kind of changed recently. It used to be it's fringe, like undrafted free agents you want to develop, and you still have some of those guys, but you're seeing some veterans, that are that you're putting on the practice squad to call up on game day, guys, that like you sort of figure aren't going to get picked up somewhere else, but but will still be part of what you're doing. So you could see some of these guys end up on the practice squad. So again, I like the Gibbons signing. That's not as high in the billing signing, but they do need help the defensive line. So, well, we're going to get into the mock drafts, and we're going to start with Ashton's first. He's gonna put his up, and what we'll do is when it comes to your mock draft, we'll just let you walk through the picks and tell us your rationale, and then we'll kind of then the other two of us will give our feedback, and then we'll do that for our mocks before we get to the viewer mocks. So Ashton, take it away. Tell us what your thought process was with your mock drafts. Run us through the picks.
Yeah, so I would say overall with this one, this was kind of like rebuilding or starting the build through the trenches and focusing on strengthening up both side both sides of those while getting more capital for future drafts. Also, I was able to trade back out of the third round to get you guys an extra second in 27, which is widely considered one of the best drafts in last decade. So I thought that was great value. Starting off with the first pick, we kind of talked about a little bit before the live. 3 is such a hard spot to be in this draft,
Mm-hmm.
especially considering the fact the best players aren't high value position players. So me personally, I think Jeremiah Love would be more than worth the third overall pick. I am very high on Love. I think he's going to be dynamic, electric, even someone who could line up as wide receiver or tight end for any offense. And the amount of shenanigans offensive coordinator or offensive minded head coach could do with Love would be very versatile. And I would say that wouldn't be a bad pick. But this isn't about what I would pick. It's more like what I think a GM in the NFL would pick, a more safe pick. And I think that would be Mount Noah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think we also said before the live, it is very much this tackle class. You're not going to get any elite guys like Penny Sewell, like
Sewell.
from the
Yeah.
Sewell, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, from the Lions. But you are going to get some really good guys that are going to be on your roster for 8 to 10 years, solid starters. They're not going to be having highlights of pancaking 2 D linemen at the same time, but they're going to hold the sides for you. And I think Mount Noah is one of the only tackles in this class that isn't only physically able to play on the outside, but also able to play on the inside if he had to go inside, which I don't know exactly where you guys would line him up, but I would assume right tackle,
Mm-hmm.
given your tackle situation. And then moving to Miller, I am someone who watches mostly South Carolina and Georgia, and I really thought this class for Georgia defensive linemen, Miller is an outstanding D lineman when it comes to stopping the run, and I think he would help tremendously with that run stopping depth. He needs a lot of work when it comes to rushing the passer, but you guys already took somewhat of a step last year with that issue, and you could address it in future drafts. But I really thought, given where your kind of run stopping ended last year, you really need more little beef in the interior of your D line, and he would bring that to you. Now, Logan Jones is a great project player that I like coming out of Iowa. Not the most physically, I would say, when you're talking about attribute wise, like not super arm length and anything crazy like that. But he is like super strong, super quick, pretty raw as a center. So I don't know if he would be able to start instantly for you guys, but I think he would be someone who could develop pretty well into a solid center. Again, a lot of the O linemen in this class, in my opinion, aren't people who jump off the page, but could potentially provide a lot of decent value. Kilgore, now a lot of other people are going to be talking about the other cornerback from out of South Carolina. Kilgore is, in my opinion, as good in zone. He needs a little bit of work in man, but as a South Carolina fan, there's a lot of things that went wrong with that South Carolina team, especially on offense. They probably had the worst offensive line in football wholesale that I've ever seen on a team I've watched. And that affected every level because that defense was a top 10 college defense a year prior. So people don't realize Kilgore does have a lot of, I would say, untapped potential, especially given how bad the season went for the Gamecocks last year. And I think he would add some depth to your guys' cornerback room and kind of fight for a starting spot there in the fourth round. It was just really great value for a guy who I think is a round 2, round 3 talent when you were doing mock drafts like 2 years ago. And then more coming off a national championship. I like his tape, especially in coverage. Now, I don't know exactly where you guys are going to go defensively, philosophy wise. So I just went with a more safe pick. I do believe Moore would end up being a solid safety for someone or potentially a good box safety. So if you need someone come run downhill, play the star, potentially. I think he would be a good player there. And then getting kind of in the lower end of the draft, you're taking dart throws. I do like Wilson. He has some issues in coverage, but really good, really physical, and really good at run stopping. Again, my focus on this draft for you guys was helping your defense stop the run and kind of stop the bleeding there. And then, as you mentioned before, a lot of people find Pavia a little controversial. It's a 7th round pick. I thought you guys could take a shot on a QB, see if he could make the roster and not have to try to pay him extra money as an undrafted free agent. So,
Okay. Marcus, you want to give any thoughts on Ashton's mock?
Well, unfortunately, because there's so many obviously prospects to look over and whatnot, haven't really started on making sure that I like get most of these guys, at least be able to check out like the quick 2 minute drill on them or just to check to see what they have to bring onto the table. But obviously, the number one, the first round pick is the one that we're kind of at, you know, we're kind of at like at a crossroads with what direction to go. Now with Francis, I've said multiple times because they say that Fanu and Maigoa are kind of interchangeable. I think mostly people are going towards the Francis, Mainoa being like the first tackle taken in the draft. But to me, I've made the case that if you're not going to pick up any of these defensive playmakers, you move back and then you draft either Fano or Mainoa wherever you land. It might be 10th, it might be whatever. If you're in like the 10, 15 range, then one of those two are going to be there available. The reason why is because I've asked the question time and time again or looked up as to why Francis at number 3, and the best answer I've gotten is he's a starting tackle. Well, I've asked like, you're going to draft a starting tackle number 3 overall when we have absolutely no pass rush. When in our defense, that middle of the defense has been our biggest weak spot. Of course, even though I wasn't high on Garrett Williams as the apex in our scheme and whatnot, he's out anyway, and he might not even be the same because of his Achilles tear. So we have constantly passed up and either these big talented guys and have gone the direction of either going offense that hasn't even reached the ceiling. And I get that the offensive coordinator is the one that's taking all the blame, but most of the time it's just that we're drafting for starters. And while people will talk about Paris Johnson being an all-pro Pro Bowl guy, he didn't make the Pro Bowl and he wasn't even playing at that level this year. I was shocked to see the the pass rush win rate that was opposed, like the people who lined up across from him, how much pressure was given up on that left side of the offensive line. And of course, I've mentioned it time and time again. It's just something that we just kind of ignore. And so you're looking towards paying him probably this year or next year. And now you're going to draft another tackle in the first round. And what are you going to do if he hits the ceiling? Well, obviously now you're going to have to either let go of Paris Johnson or let him go to free agency. So now you got him for 4 or 5 years. If he doesn't hit a ceiling, you've essentially drafted somebody in the third pick of this draft and either pass up the opportunity to get a good pass rusher regardless of his arm size, a good size other pass rusher, and of course you have Arvil Reese still on the board at that pick, which usually if I look at like any type of big boards or whatnot, he is not only the one of the most talented players in this draft, but he's constantly either number 3 on the big board and whatnot, just to get somebody that if he gets the ceiling, the difference between a good and a great player at offensive lineman is actually the value drops from there because now you're going to have to pay him even bigger contracts to just play at that level. So I'm not on board with that. I wish they would talk about trading back to be able to get him at least so that you get more value. But I don't want to do this again with the Paris Johnson situation where we traded back. We drafted Ojulari in the second round. He was supposed to be the replacement to Will Anderson. Will Anderson's now part of the best defense in the NFL, and he is a key component to that. And we're over here, can't even stop the run. Pass coverage is up and down. We have no idea what the future of that's going to go. And we're going to watch these players essentially be great in other defenses. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just clarify
Yeah.
something? The reason I didn't trade back is, and that would be my personal preference, was the only person who offered me a trade was at like pick 25, and I was getting offered like a late second round pick, and I didn't think that was worth
Yeah.
the value overall. But I do agree. I would go with one of the Ohio State linebackers or Love if it's a personal like preference for you guys, because I think Sony Styles is he's going to be electric for whoever drafts him. And if you're talking about bang for your buck, even at inside linebacker, he's going to be a generational inside linebacker. The kid is nuts.
Yeah. And I'll probably talk about Malinoa more when I get more to my mock draft. My preference would be to trade back because the top of this class is weird. The best players are non-premier positions, non-premium positions. Like if we could trade back and get Malinoa somewhere between 5 and 10, I can live with that if you're adding draft capital and then still getting getting your right tackle of the future. For me, I'm fine with that. Brian mentioned something, about Pavia, like, that he, after watching Murph for 7 years, I'd laugh an hour straight if Monty did that. He likes your draft. That Miller's good. He thought, yeah. And, the thing with Pavia, like, again, I think the biggest thing, whatever you might think of him, our owner is really sensitive to public perceptions. He's not good at managing them, but he's sensitive to it. And I can't imagine him being okay with drafting a polarizing quarterback after coming off a quarterback that's kind of polarizing, right? Taking
Don't
a
forget
quarterback.
this mock, or sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but this mock does include an extra 2027 second, which
Yeah.
a lot of GMs say is equivalent to a first in a normal
Yes.
draft.
Now I will say though, one of the things I've also heard though is no one wants to trade away future draft capital. So finding someone who's
how
giving you that
realistic.
second seems unlikely to me. I love it. Like if they can do it, I am all for it. But I have a feeling other GMs aren't going to want to do that, if that makes sense. Everyone's trying to keep their 2027 picks. So you're 100, but you're right about that for sure. Yeah. But I don't mind a dart throw on a quarterback. I just think if they do, this isn't the guy that they'll do it with. If that makes, I could see the guy from Arkansas. If they're going to take a dart throw on a guy late, maybe someone like that. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what
This QB class is so bad, man.
Yeah, it really is.
Such a rough QB class. To be needing a QB, this is not the year.
100%, which sucks for us. I'm just going to comment on one more player that I think is really interesting because Jalen Kilgore, you mentioned from South Carolina. And, we talked about this before, and I've tweeted something about this about when I tweeted something about the Cardinals kind of bringing back Murphy Bunting, and that wasn't, he struggled for us. Fans were kind of like surprised they brought him back. But one of the things I did a little bit of a deeper dive, and the thing is, like, we've drafted 7 cornerbacks the last 3 years. We have a lot of young cornerbacks, some that I really like, but Garrett Williams, who's coming back from the Achilles that Marcos mentioned, he's had a history of injuries. I thought he was really good for us, but is he going to be back? Is he going to be the same? He was our primary slot cornerback. Murphy Bunting has over 1,000 career snaps in the slot, but all the other cornerbacks on our roster besides Garrett Williams and Murphy Bunting have a total of like 95 total snaps in the slot all together amongst like 5 or 6 other guys. They are primarily outside cornerbacks. So I have not been selecting cornerbacks in my mock drafts because they have so many of them, but I've reconsidered that. And I think if the Cardinals were to take a cornerback, I think it's going to be later, but I think it's going to be a slot cornerback. And the thing is, Jalen Kilgore has been primarily a slot cornerback. He had
Really good in
497
slot.
snaps in the slot last year, as opposed to 4 of them on the outside. So I think if you're going cornerback, you went the right direction here. Getting a guy who's, if they're going to draft a cornerback, it's going to be a slot cornerback. Yeah, and Murphy Bunting hasn't been great, and I agree. And I think, but the only reason they brought him back is because he is the only guy who has any significant experience playing the slot on the roster. So I think they brought him back in case they don't draft a guy or Garrett Williams isn't able to come back. He's what they've got right now. No, I get it. Maybe you're better off to go get a free agent. But he does know the system, and if he's if he's your third cornerback instead of your first or second, maybe it's not as bad. But and Brian's kind of the same thing. When he wasn't terrible if he's your third or fourth, right? But he's asked cornerback 1. He is so. Ashton, I think the fact that you went with a slot cornerback, if they're going to go cornerback, that's what makes sense there. So
Yeah, he can tackle too, and he would
Yeah.
be really good in the run game for you guys also.
Yeah.
For a cornerback.
Yeah,
for sure.
that position has been shifting to being one of the most important positions in defenses. So I would agree with SMB having that, obviously having the experience at slot. But the problem with that is that I don't think he is the next coming of like the next iteration of what we need to have there in that position, because I do not think he's a solid versus a run. You're right. Apex defenders need to be good and solid against the run because they're part of the run fit. And unfortunately, the one that they did draft decided not to develop him in the slot. You know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Keitrell Clark. Now he's wasted essentially 3 years in a position that he was more typecasted to just throw him on the outside where he wasn't going to be good. And one thing about, and I've talked about Garrett Williams, he's horrible versus man coverage. And I had always brought up that, you cannot play man coverage if your linebackers and your apex are bad against them, and they just if they want to go towards the route of trying to get this defense at the very least to at least be competitive, Kilgore would be somebody that I would say yes. If he's solid, he's good, and if he's able to defend in man coverage, then yeah, I'd be for that pick.
Yeah, and to be clear, Murphy Bunting is definitely not the answer. He is a backup plan, in my view. He is not the future of the slot position in my view for the Cardinals. He is, it's better than a guy off the street. And some people might disagree, but I think, Murphy Bunting's been in the system. He's a veteran. To have him as a guy with slot experience bringing back is kind of, so we're not throwing an undrafted free agent in there instead, is kind of what that signing is for. Moving along though, Marcos, bringing up your mock, walk us through your picks, your rationale, and then we'll give Ashton and myself a chance to kind of give our thoughts.
Go ahead, Chad. Go ahead and start grilling me about how bad this draft is. I do not care, because I was just like, you know what? Let's just see, let's go balls to the wall, because Monty Ossenfort is the most averted to taking risks and whatnot. So if I was to take over, I'd be like, nope, we're gonna do this because your way hasn't been working. Get out of here with that conservative mindset and approach. So obviously, you'll see there's 2 quarterbacks that I drafted. Ty Simpson being at the second round, with people are very no, don't stay away from him. Trust me, the guy is better upside, just not a starter right off the bat. And obviously, we have the plan of not whoever we're going to draft that quarterback, we're not going to start him right away. And even if you were to draft a quarterback in next year's draft, one of the most underrated philosophies when it comes to like team building is you have to take a quarterback at least once every single year. And you might think, oh, you're burning that. You're burning picks past the fourth round constantly because how many of these fourth rounders, fifth, sixth rounders turn out to be at least like starters in the NFL? It's not really not that high. So Ty Simpson drafted in the second round. Caleb Tiemann, big boy, 6'8", 6'7", not a starter, but definitely has high upside. A guy that you could use better in pass protection than you would in run blocking. But even though he graded well on both of those, I would say like that guy in the third round is actually somewhat of a steal because I do not think he's going to go in the third round. But of course, if I'm wrong, go ahead and clip it and tell me how dumb I am. Of course, we're going to talk about the first guy that I drafted, and that was Arvell Reese. Now, I get that we are very averse to drafting linebackers because of our history of drafting Isaiah Simmons, Zaven Collins, and even Hassan Riddick, who actually turned out to be a really good linebacker. But my issue has been that the people developing these players have not only fumbled their usage, but they didn't put them in a good path to be able to even have the success they need to have. And, you know, if Zaven Collins gets released right now, he's not going to be a starter in anybody else's defense. He might be a rotational guy, but that's his potential to become a really good Mike linebacker thrown out the window because they went ahead and moved him around. However, Arvell Reese is basically, in my opinion, the same type of person that Micah Parsons was for Penn State. The same exact usage, same exact like body form, shape, being stockier up and down, hyper athletic linebacker is being used the same exact way that Micah Parsons was. Now, people were thinking, what is Micah Parsons going to be once he gets drafted? Is he going to be an inside linebacker full time? Are they going to play him at edge? That was a question because they used him to, you know, line him up all over the line of scrimmage and blitz him most of the time. He had high upside at being able to rush the quarterback. And so, because we need that playmaker, in my opinion, we don't really have that at the moment. Not even a sweat we can't count on him to come up with a sack fumble. But when you have a guy that you can line up all over the line of scrimmage, have him stand up, be that extra pressure guy, even dropping him off in coverage because he was good against that and he was also good against the run. The possibility of making this defense somewhat catching up to our division, which every single defense in our division either has playmakers or they have top five or top 10 rank at the very least in any given year. That's how they keep every single game competitive, and to keep every game competitive within arm's reach. And we have our quarterback room that we do have. That's going to come in handy for us to have at least better a better floor each year. That's not going to go below what eight wins or 7 wins or 6 wins, whatever. We're not going to be considered the worst team to go after because then our defense can ascend us to becoming a constant playoff contender. And of course, I've been doing a lot of research when I'm looking at like the top defenses in the league, number 1 to 5 and whatnot. Those teams often go to win the Super Bowl when a number one defense ranked team goes up against the number one ranked offense. They've won 3 times out of all the matchups and whatnot. So we need to start addressing the defense. We need to start getting serious about it. I want to see my team not only make the playoffs, but go further than that.
Ashton, any quick thoughts on Marcos's mock draft?
I mean, if Reese falls to 3, he would be a perfect pick. A fantastic linebacker. He would also be good if you play him at edge. Like you said, he's very similar to Micah Parsons. I don't know if he would be as good as Micah coming out of the gate. He might have some growing pains the first like few weeks, getting used to the NFL speed. But that would definitely be a home run hit there, in my personal opinion, even being a linebacker that early, just because how weird this draft is.
Yeah. Um, yeah, 2 quarterbacks is certainly a choice. but
Yeah, that. I'm not gonna say that was a
yeah,
smart choice. I just did it. I'll be honest with you. He was the best guy in the
yeah,
very
yeah,
next
yeah.
round. I was like, 6th round, you're gonna burn it
Yep.
anyway. And plus, he gave me an A-. So
Hey, there you
that's
go.
not
They
a bad
like it.
idea.
So, but real
Uh,
quick, I do want to just comment like Ty Simpson, a lot of people kind of polarizing, it's a bad quarterback class. He's the second best. Um, I'm kind of torn on it because, I did a tweet about this. I look at him as a little bit like the Jackson Dart Tyler Shuck situation, because neither of those guys were like, thought of as, first round lock quarterbacks. They were day two quarterbacks that and I'm not saying they're necessarily Ty Simpson's the same type of quarterback from a play style perspective, but in terms of kind of how they grade out as prospects, they were all kind of that day two quarterback that might slip into round one. And they're not that clear franchise number one guy, but New Orleans and New York liked them, and they drafted them in the first and the second round. And they, it's still, they played, it's still early. They didn't completely set the world on fire, but both of those teams are happy with those quarterbacks and optimistic about their future. And to me, Ty Simpson he's not the clear, top five, pick quarterback, but he is a kind of quarterback that if a coach likes him, could bring him in and develop him, and he could be that guy for them who, like a Tyler Shuck, it'll be interesting to see how his career goes. He could go up or he could flame out, right? So, if LaFleur likes him, I could see them taking him. On day three of all the quarterbacks there, to me, Klubnik is the one that best fits the system. Maybe he's a career backup at best. I think that, I could see a scenario where someone drafts him, develops him, and he fits the system, kind of like, what happened in San Francisco, right? With the guy they drafted, so who knows, right? So, uh, so yeah, some interesting picks there.
I like that comment by Chris Young.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. I get it. Like, we already have two quarterbacks and whatnot, but heck, just go ahead and either cut one of the guys that doesn't win. Just do the whole. I'm gonna take a word, not a word, saying by, I forgot what his name is, from the stock trading or whatever it's called, the PFF guys.
Mm-hmm.
Have a situation like the Dark Knight or the Dark Knight Rises, I believe, or is it? I don't remember. It was the second one with the Heath Ledger Joker in it. Just break the stick, throw it in between whoever's in there, and whoever survives. There you go.
Yeah, Hunger Games. See what survives. And real quick, you included how the first round went. So we see that Ruben Bain went, and then then Arvo Reese was there. So I'm going to go on to mine now. And I want to. When I do my mock drafts, each time I'm on here, it's not necessarily what I think is most likely to happen, though some of the picks are picks I might think are likely, but it's more I'm trying different looks, and sometimes I want to make a point with the players I draft. And I'm not always picking the guy I want, but sometimes I'm picking a guy that illustrates something, right? And I think my first and last picks both are those types of picks. So I did go with Francis Manoa. And that is, I don't like the idea of taking Manoa at 3. I think he's a good player. I think he can be a starting right tackle for us. This class is weird. We've talked about it at the top. The best players are non-premium positions. I would be much more comfortable taking Manoa at 7 or 8, right? If we could trade back. And if we can trade back, I would be up for that, because the best players are non-premium, and I'd rather trade back and then get another pick on day 2 where there's going to be a lot of value in this draft, because it's like there's a lot of good players on day 2, but at the top it's kind of weird. But at the same time, because it's a weird draft class, I don't know that teams are going to be looking to move up, right? So as much as I'd love to trade back, if any of them, any of those teams are willing to trade up, then I'm up for it. But I don't know we'll be able to. So I went with Manoa, not because he's the one I really want at this pick 3, but the point I want to make is, one, that it might not, trading back might not be an option for us if we don't get anyone who's interested in trading up. And also, there has been talk that there could be a really big run on tackles late first round, and the guys that I usually like to take at pick 34 could be gone. Because most of my mock drafts are Bain at 3 and a tackle at pick 34. Usually, the guy from Max from Arizona State, but sometimes other guys. But a lot of the mock drafts, those tackles are gone late in first round, and I could see that happening. And it could be a situation that if you're wanting to get a right tackle starter who you feel like could be that guy, you might have to take him in the first round. Now if you can trade back, do it, great. So I made that pick this time. It's not a pick I feel great about, but it's more to illustrate the point that one, trade backs might be tough, and two, the tackles, there could be a run late first round, and all the guys I'd love to get at pick 34 at tackle could be gone. So when I did that, I went Zion Young, an edge rusher, at 34. Because I agree we need to have, Josh Sweat had a nice year for us. I think Walter Nolan's gonna, if he can be healthy, can bring some pass rush. But you want to bring some guys in there for the future. And Josh Sweat, won't be here forever. So I went with Zion Young, and then I went on third round with Grayson Halton. I think we need interior defensive line help in the worst way. I think that's a room that needs a lot of work. And he's a guy who's disruptive, had a great combine, great kind of pre-draft process. So he's a guy who I really like. Fourth round, I went with Billy Schrouth, and with the analysis I've done with the Monty draft strategy, the almighty chart that people in the Discord know, fourth round is a hot spot where he likes to take guards or centers, interior offensive linemen. So I had them adding a guy to the rotation. Fifth round and sixth round, I think, are a really good spot for linebackers at Monty, really where he likes to take them. So I added a very athletic linebacker in Caleb Alarms Orr, who had a really good combine. So adding some players to that linebacker room to develop. Then went with Bishop Fitzgerald as safety in round 6. He's in a lot of my mocks. He is a safety that I often compare to Jalen Thompson. He's versatile, plays in the slot and deep in the box. I think he's a little bit of almost like a Jalen Thompson clone, or at least a poor man's Jalen Thompson, has that kind of player. So bring him in to develop. And then the last pick, Jaden Kennedy I drafted him the first cornerback in any of my mock draft Monday mocks this year, to illustrate the point that we've already brought up, that if they take a cornerback, I see it as being a slot cornerback. And then one last note on this, the Monty draft chart that we talk about, the almighty chart, there's 2 spots where they really like to take cornerbacks. Day 2, especially in round 2, but day 2, rounds 2 or 3, and then again in round 6 and 7. Like Monty and the Patriots, when he was in their front office, they like taking quarterbacks day 2 and then again in the last couple rounds. And I think those last couple rounds is probably where they go after slot guys. So that's where I went with Kennedy. So, Ashton, do you have any thoughts on this mock?
Yeah, I would say Caleb. I really love that pick. Kind of I think that's mid 5th, maybe later part of the 5th. I think that's what the 5th and 6th round are for, finding these kind of athletic freaks that are really too raw to go a little bit earlier in the draft, and seeing if you can fit in. Kind of problem is you have to develop them, and that's really where you have to have a good front office and a good coaching staff to be able to kind of groom them up into good starting linebackers. So I think Caleb is good there. I did notice between all of our mocks, a quick question for you guys. Is wide receiver kind of like off the board? Because I would argue that's the strongest position group in this draft, especially when you're talking about the 2nd and 3rd round. That I really think you're going to have starting wide receivers found in the 2nd, 3rd round of this draft. Are you guys really completely like that's off the board for you guys, given Wilson's ascension, and still hoping you have something in your first round drafted wide receiver?
Marcus, you want to give a quick response to that? Yeah.
I will say that I am very comfortable with the wide receiver room, especially since we made our great signing of, I keep forgetting what his name is, but he's the guy that celebrated and was
From the
good
49ers
dude.
and
Yeah, from the
Patriots.
49ers. Just a good guy. I like that guy already and whatnot. So we have a lot of depth when it comes to our wide receiver room.
Kendrick
And
Bourne.
Kendrick Bourne, there you go. Sorry that I forgot his name. It always happens to me. So I think we have more than enough depth at that position, and it's actually going to be an issue to try to even maintain and keep some of these guys. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. hasn't ascended to be that 1,000 yard receiver last year, mostly because of injuries and some mental stuff. But this upcoming year, the hope is that he will ascend to that position, passing Michael Wilson. And if that doesn't happen, then Marvin Harrison Jr. is not going to be part of the future, and it's going to be Michael Wilson. So there's only one ball, and of course, it can only go around to certain players so many times.
Yeah. Real quick, I'll give a couple comments from the chat and then I'll give my response to Ashton. Lance, thanks for being here. Long time supporter channel. He thinks with all the guards we got in free agency, we don't take an inferior offensive line at 104, which I could see that. He thinks we need a splash receiver or defensive back. Chris saying for me, the only wide receiver I'm looking at is an elite speed guy. So in general, my view of this is this, like, Trey McBride is, pass catcher number one, right? So that, and as Marcus says, so many targets to go around. So I think when it comes to receiver, you've already got your top three pass catchers. Marvin Harrison Jr., I know he's been disappointing so far for some people, but I think they're going to develop him, and he's going to, at least through his rookie deal, he's going to be one of those guys. Hopefully he develops to the point where it makes sense to extend him. Michael Wilson obviously had really emerged. I think they will sign him to an extension. So you don't need your number one or two wide receiver set. So for me, I'm not drafting a receiver early because I think they don't need a top two receiver, and Bourne bringing in their top, they've got three receivers you can rely on. So I'm not going receiver early. Chris makes a good point. We don't have a guy to take the top off the defense. So I could see a guy who's high speed, but I also could see a bigger guy, like a guy, McAllister out of TCU. I sometimes like taking in my mock draft. So for me, I don't think receivers off the table, but if they take one, I think it's a day three receiver, for depth or speed or both. So
What
that's kind
about
of my.
round three? Round three.
I mean, could they? Maybe. For me, I'm not. I think there's other needs that are bigger needs that I'd rather take there. But for me, with where they're at, I think you just need to add some depth to the receiver. And to me, if you're drafting a receiver in round three, you want him to be eventually your number two receiver or number three at worst. And I think
Yeah,
what we're looking for is depth here.
I'll just add a little few notes on the wide receiver class for kind of like mid picks in case if they want to go that route. You're especially going after a guy who can take off the top. If they go early third or try to trade back up into the second for someone, Chris Braswell, I would
Mhm.
really think is someone. I think he's
Mhm.
going to be starting wide receiver for someone
Yeah.
eventually. He is an athletic freak. He is huge and quick for his size. He will definitely be gone if you want a later burner and someone who can take off top.
Yeah.
But someone else I also love coming from Georgia, Zachariah Branch. He is an
Mhm.
underrated route runner for his size and speed. And I think he ran one of the fastest 40s.
Mhm.
So, and he would be around that late third, maybe fourth. And if you can get him, I would be very happy having
Yeah.
him like rotationally come in as third wide receiver and
Yeah.
take shots down the field at him.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, depth at receiver. I didn't take one in this mock, but I take a late wide receiver, a day three wide receiver fairly often. Marcos, do you want to give just a quick thought on this mock?
Well, I got two like interesting like studies or whatnot. One of them was like something that I really had kind of known about what's going on with wide receivers and especially the speed factor and whatnot. There's a lot of receivers that run like 4-3 or 4-2, and they kind of get boxed into doing one role specifically, and that's going to be obviously the go route, post, and corner guy that because of the speed they want to do that, and sometimes it's even more so exploited as the gadget guy. And I've noticed that those top receivers that get taken in the first round, they're like speedsters and whatnot, they get kind of packaged into that type of role and whatnot, and it limits them. And then when you pay attention to the top receivers on, obviously the ones on in the market or the ones that are in the NFL, it's always like people that run like 4.4, 4.5, and it's mostly because of route running situations. So taking somebody who's a speedster in the fourth round, fifth round, that's actually what I would say is a good move because they're later in the draft and not sooner because it kind of limits them production wise the faster they run. It's kind of weird to just think about that, but just pay attention to the people that've been 4.3 and 4.2 guys and what roles they do or what roles they play. The other one, there's this unconventional change when it comes to positions. For example, like the tackle is considered a premium position, and how I mentioned most of these tackles, especially when I look at the top teams and the ones that have been more like top five, like offensive line units and whatnot, most of the tackles that they would have is they would have a pipeline system. So you draft the first round tackle, he's going to start because that's how you want him. He hits the starter ceiling, which is like the step that you're hoping that they don't fall below, and you have a tackle that you may have depth wise. It's a young guy, just taking, like learning the system, practicing, becoming that top rated guy. Eventually, like for instance, I was hoping that was going to be the case with Josh Jones when they didn't start him, but then he ascended to that role for half a season, and of course the Cardinals proceeded to just get rid of him when he had some sorry snaps and put some good film out there. And so to me, that role is kind of falling, which is why you constantly see mock drafts having Maunoa just not being in the as third overall. And when it comes to defenses, that big nickel is what they're ascending to combat high motion, uh, the high motion, and especially now that the 13 personnel heavier sets are being used more often, and that's where the next step is going to. So these positions are kind of they're going through a gray area and they're kind of blurring. I understand the thought that this is a weak top, like top of the draft is not being seen as a good draft because the top positions aren't premier and whatnot, or they're not like the premium type. But there's constant changes to like what defenses and offenses are going, and it kind of puts like positions to kind of change around and whatnot. And so some people will say there's no blue chippers, and some people will say there are blue chippers. So we're in the middle of a big change, and it's challenging a lot of like philosophies and whatnot. I don't know if you understand what I'm getting at.
So, do you have any thoughts on my mock draft?
I think I will say, like, obviously the Francis Manoa, I
Yeah,
really like. It sucks that that there's no trade back scenarios on this one.
yeah,
So Manoa, obviously, I'm like, you can get our starting tackle. Like, you could try to figure out a starting tackle. By the way, like when it comes to like paying off, your top guys, you're gonna obviously let one of them go. So, edge rusher Zion Young, not really familiar with them, unfortunately. Grace Halton, I love that pick, and I
yeah.
love that pick for the reasons that you just mentioned. Athletic,
Mhm.
defensive line. You can kind of get like a starter tackle within the first 3 rounds. Obviously, the top of the guys. You have this guy right here, and then the next guy will kind of drop immensely and whatnot. But these guys are going towards the direction of like having more athletic, even at the defensive line. It's just kind of weird how it's molding to that position. So I really like that Grace Halton one. And
Yeah.
if he is in the third round, even though he gave you a B plus, if he is in the third round, I say that's an A plus pick. So
I
I
think he
would
might go in the second round with what he did
exact
at the combine. Yeah,
exactly. So just getting him in the third round would be like a coup for us. So
yeah,
if that's a possibility and whatnot,
yeah,
guard like your guard pick, adding depth, having somebody that's not going to start right away, but will eventually take that starter role. We would hope. Like
yeah.
I was hoping John Gaines would be that next person. Obviously, they kind of set him back to the bench and whatnot. Really high on him. Caleb Ilarms. I'm
He
not.
had a good combine. That's kind of
He had
why I
a
picked him.
he did have a good combine. If you let go of Owen Papo, like if you're not bringing him back, I would say he's the replacement for that, like
Yeah,
that position and whatnot. The hopeful guy that can, become the starter. I will say that like the project I'm doing is I'm trying to take every name, every position from the last 10 years. So it's taking me literally almost years to complete that, and I'm trying to figure out what position goes where
Yeah.
usually. And tackle is it's so weird.
Yeah.
Like it's just a weird position. You can't really nail it down. Bishop Fitzgerald, I really like that pick. Yeah, you're right. It is like Jaden Thompson. Jaden Kennedy, not really familiar with what's going
Yeah.
on with.
And I took him mainly because he had a lot of slot
Yeah.
snaps, right?
Oh no, I'm not
Yeah.
familiar
Yeah.
like what the
Yeah.
issue is with that guy. Like
Yeah.
what is going on with him?
Don't know a lot about him either, to be honest. Yeah, I just at
Oh,
that
okay.
point, really, what I did is seventh round, take a flyer on a cornerback. Who's the highest rating cornerback who played primarily in the slot was kind of what I did
Oh,
there, right?
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's a seventh rounder. At this point,
Yeah,
you're just like anybody.
yeah, right. Except Pavia, just messing with the Ashton. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Couldn't help it. Uh, So what we're going to do, we're going to move on to the mock drafts that were submitted by viewers. And the way I want to approach this is just, I don't want to be here all night on these. So what we'll do is with each mock, we'll go to Ashton, then Marcos, and then me, and just take one of the picks from the mock that's interesting to you. You like it, you don't like it, or you want to talk about that player, and just briefly comment on one of the picks. So I'll real quick summarize the draft, and then we'll just each talk about a pick. So the first one's from Brian. He went with Mauinoa, then linebacker from Texas, Anthony Hill, Dominique Orange, defensive lineman from Iowa State, Kalen Rutledge, guard, Skylar Bell, wide receiver, Jalen Kilgore. They have him listed as a safety, but he played both safety and slot. Mikhail Kamara, edge, and then Micah Morris, guard. Ashton, do you want to comment? Pick a player and comment on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think I took Kilgore in the fourth. So if you got Kilgore in the fifth, that
Mhm.
fantastic value. I really do think Kilgore would have gone in the second or third round had South Carolina not been a complete hot fire dumpster fire of a season last year. So yeah, I think that's a great pick there if he falls that far.
Marcus,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is Dominic Orange known as Big Orange? Because I've heard
I
quite a
believe
bit
so.
from this guy. Yep, I like that pick. Third round, really. Like I mean, any defensive lineman that you can get in the third round that's really solid is a good pick.
Yeah, and he's 6'4", 325, so he's kind of got that little bit of that nose tackle build. He's moved around, but he played mostly in the A gap, so a little bit of versatility there. Yeah, Skylar Bill is a nice receiver. That could be, if he lasts to the fourth round, that would be a heck of a pick. And I'll just add a bonus. I love Kalen Rutledge. I've talked about him before, so I like this mock in general. I think there's a lot of good players there. The first pick, obviously, we can kind of quibble about, which we have for quite a bit, but getting that linebacker Hill, I feel like this is a really solid mock. So I think Brian did a really good job here for show. We have Chris Young, who has been in the chat with us. Ashton, give us a thought.
Uh, A, he took Branch. I think that's a really great pick. I love Branch coming out of Georgia. I think he has real high potential, especially starting off initially kind of as a gadget guy. And you guys are getting a new offensive head coach. He's going to want some new toys on top of already good offensive personnel you guys have, especially with having I would say, the best tight end he's ever had to work with. And, two really good starting wide receivers. You just add a speedster on there, and maybe you can play around with the personnel groupings like the Rams started to do last year, because that was, I think I mentioned it earlier, one of only three performances against Seahawks that gave them troubles, the Bucks and the Rams. And a part of that was us forcing them in uncomfortable situations with players that can not only block but also catch, and having tight ends to do both and wide receivers do both. And I think you guys have potential having personnel that can do that switch of having 12 personnel, 13 personnel, but running 11 personnel concept plays out of the grouping, if that makes sense. And that
Yeah.
really puts the defense in a bind.
Marcus.
I'll be honest. I have no idea who any of these players are. I'm trying to I'm trying to recognize at least one of them, and I was like, no, I
Not guys you've
can't.
looked
Like,
at. Well,
nope.
you can talk about positions.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. Okay, so defensive tackle, second round. Yes, I do like that. Second round, usually you get yourself some starters or somebody who slipped into the first, out of the first round. So that I'm for that. Safety third round, focusing on defense. I see back to back picks. Obviously, I'm a big defensive guy, so I'd say I like that. From what I heard from Ashton about Zachary Branch being the gadget guy, yeah, you know what, fourth round you have yourself a gadget guy. That's good. We always need. It's underrated to have a gadget guy out there. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people don't like those people because they're more distractions, but you do need someone who's a distraction out there, and it really helps open up offenses sometimes. Edge on the fifth round now. I saw that Brett Coleman video, and he criticized that whole system that they had going on with the Ravens and their approach and whatnot. He said, "Hey, it worked out for them until it stopped working out for them." So that guy, I would assume, is more of like a hey, this guy, like he's very interested. I have good traits with him. So, a sixth round edge, I mean fifth round edge. Well, it could be up and down. Offensive center, I believe.
Mhm.
Brockheimer, sixth round center.
Yeah.
That's good. And Cole Payton, quarterback. I mean, you're a dart thrower right there. So yeah, I
Yeah.
would say, with the exception of me not knowing any of these people, I say, yeah, I could go for this draft.
So I'm gonna real quick. Kamari Ramsey, is out of USC. He's listed. He's a safety, but he also played a lot of snaps in the slot. In fact, he had in 2025 251 snaps in the slot, then 103 in the box safety, and 93 as a deep safety, seven at corner. So like I like that pick, and like we talk about their need at slot, and maybe but they also have a need to add to the safety room, kind of, with Jalen Thompson moving on. They brought in Wingard, who's a nice depth guy. But, Rabbit's going to be the starter across from Buda Baker, but they need to they need to develop Buda's, heir apparent. I kind of like the idea of bringing in someone like Ramsey who can play in the slot and safety so he can see the field, kind of fill that dual role. So that's kind of a pick I like. Real quick, I want to say hey to Paul G. Paul's a really good dude he has been a Cardinals fan longer than I know you two guys have been alive, maybe me. Paul's just a really great guy. And Paul and I have been in touch, and everyone just put a thought out for Paul. He's dealing with treatments for cancer, and he's just a longtime Cardinals fan, really dedicated to the Cardinals community. Has a Cardinals discussion board that he has been running for I think over 20 years, and Paul is just a great guy. So everyone just send some love out to Paul right now if you could. So thank you for joining us, Paul. Hope you're doing well. We've got Classy Nasty in with us. Thank you for being here. So yeah, I think the Ramsey pick is really kind of an intriguing one to me. So yeah, 63 years a Cardinals fan. Okay, so much respect. He is an elder statesman, has been a fan of this organization for a long time. Suffered as a Cardinals fan for a long time. So just everyone send your love out to Paul, please.
I'll be praying for you, Paul.
Keep
Yeah,
the
for
good
sure.
fight, Paul. You got this.
So we've got a mock draft from Gazornik, good dude who's part of the Discord. No Brian here. Yeah, no. So sorry, my brain's going sideways. But Gazornik got this mock draft with Spencer Fano, Cassius Howe, Ty Simpson, Emmanuel Pregnan, Josiah Trotter, Malachi Fields, Skylar Gill, Howard, Jamari Taylor, and Andre Fuller, a cornerback. Ashton, pick kind of one player on here and give us your one pick on here and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, the guy that initially jumps out. I think the second strongest um kind of field in this draft class is linebacker, and I think Trotter is a solid pick, especially in the late third. I don't think he'll end up being there. I would expect him to go early third. I think there's going to be run on linebackers in the second and third outside of the first two Ohio guys. Uh, Potentially some guys on the late first, but given with how good the wide receiver class is, I don't fully see that. But if he fell there and you got him there, I think he would fill some holes for you guys. He's a good run stopper. I think he's a little underrated with his coverage, but needs to work on that a little bit. But yeah, would be a plus pick.
Marcos, give us a thought on one of the picks.
I like this draft, especially the
Mhm.
first four picks, 5 of the 4 picks. So I do like Josiah Trotter. At I mean, he got him at the top of the third round. He did a lot of work at the beginning. Spano being at number 10, great pick. Cassius Hiles, who's supposed to be somebody who's late first and early second, good pick. And of course, Ty Simpson. So good job there, man. That was really good work.
Yeah, I think Cassius Townsend interesting. Had 12 sacks last year for A&M. Grades really well. I'm gonna pick kind of maybe a more obscure pick here. Jamari Taylor, the running back. Late. Obviously the team's bringing back Connor. They signed Tyler Algier. They've got Trey Benson. So the running back room is kind of full right now. But I think I could see them taking a guy to develop. And what's kind of interesting to me about Jamari Taylor, one of the things I've really kind of taken to looking at when it comes to running backs is some things that translate to the NFL, and that's their yards after contact and elusiveness rating. And the top guys, early usually grade really well in those things. But when you're looking for a running back on day 3, I try to look for a guy who has good grades on that, and his elusiveness rating of 90.9 is pretty good. It's not elite, but it's pretty good. So if I'm taking a chance on a running back on day 3, this is one of those guys that I would kind of maybe look at. Paul's asking, is Josiah Trotter related to Jeremiah Trotter? Lance says yes, he is. I'm curious what the relationship is.
It's his
Maybe
son.
Yes,
I
it
just
is
looked
son.
it up just now. Yeah,
Okay, there
so
we
that's
go.
his son.
Jeremiah Trotter's son. So there we go. So got some good bloodlines there. So yeah, I like this. I like this mock a good bit. So yes. Next up we have Brian A. Uh, so we have multiple Brian's today. Brian Abdallah, who's been in the chat tonight. So he's got Maunoa, then he's got defensive tackle Christian Miller. We got Pregnant again, the guard. R. Mason Thomas, edge. Brennan Thompson, a receiver. Nicholas Singleton, running back out of Penn State. Kendall Daniels, linebacker of Oklahoma. Dayton Everett, cornerback out of Georgia. And then Drew Aller, the quarterback out of Penn State. Ashton, thoughts?
Yeah, I would say for me, I really like the Nick Singleton, Penn State kind of pick running back there. He has a pretty quick 40 time. I don't think he did one at the combine. At least I can't find it right here. I wanted to get the actual one. But I think at his pro day, he did like 4.35. So he is a burner. I think he's more elusive than people give him credit for. He's been someone kind of on my radar. This running back class is not the best for the most part. But late in the draft, I do feel like some of these guys you could potentially get like a good receiving back and someone who could be kind of like a gadget player, but as a running back. And I think Singleton is one of those guys that could give you a little bit of variety and option late in the draft if you put him in your running back room.
Marcos.
I would be curious of what he got in return for that first trade back. That's a really good trade back. Again, for eighth overall, got yourself something in return in Francis
It looks
Manoa.
like a second round pick 42.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, all right. So
probably
that's
like
still
42 and 167.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I guess that's the best he was going to be able to get. There's no there's absolutely nothing to tell us that he's going to get a first round pick for next year. But like I do like that scenario anyways because of the fact that you still get an extra value in the second round. So I'd say good work on that first trade back right there, getting Fancy Manoa. Christian Miller, somebody who's constantly been talked about a first rounder might slip to the second round. Good pick right there. Pregnon, no, I'm not really versed on him. I will just go ahead and skip the rest of these guys and just go to Drew Aller. Drew Aller, seventh round. Yep, good pick right there.
Yeah. Then again, the one player I'm going to hone in on here is Brennan Thompson. I think he'll go earlier than this potentially, but we talked about needing a speed receiver, and that's a speed receiver, right? So that's a guy, that I would be ecstatic to take right there. Real quick, we've got Gazornik who's in here doing what he does, being the best mod in the business. Thank you for what you do. He's really great about sharing links and comments. So thank you for being with us, Gazornik, and hanging out with us. I'm sorry, Grandizer. I'm getting my names all mixed up. Grandizer. Gazornik had a mock earlier. So yeah, got some interesting picks here. Let's see. That gets us through the mocks. We made it. Lance is saying here, hey, Joe and Ashton, do a quick dive into run back Adam Randall Clemson. I think he's younger version of James Conner. I think he's a sleeper late round running back. Great scheme fit too. Okay, give him a look. So yeah, we've had a lot of mocks, that we've gone through and had a lot of good conversation. About this mock draft Monday, and really appreciate our guests today. So why don't we real quick, kind of go around, have everyone give their final thoughts, and just let people know where to find you and any content you've got going on, and anything else you want to share before we leave. Ashton, we'll let you go first.
Yeah, I co-host East Coast Rams podcast with my awesome co-host Zach Mayer. You can find us on YouTube and X and all the fun places, just East Coast Rams. We do basically during season a weekly show, and then off season we do like once every few weeks. And I appreciate you guys inviting me on. I thought it was a lot of fun. I do think you guys are on the upswing. We're in arguably the hardest division in football, and it's only getting harder, especially after this offseason. So, yeah, hopefully you guys can get a good swing at this draft, get in a good place to start building up a program. And I think you guys could be contending with LaFleur in maybe 2 or 3 years if everything goes well. Just got to get it all lined up and have to hit some of those mid-round picks pretty well, because I think that's been killing you guys. And I'll be interested to see how long you guys keep your GM if he keeps on struggling hitting those picks, because that has to be your bread and butter. You can hit a first and second rounder, but if you're not hitting those mid-level roster people, you're going to struggle, especially with depth.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ashton's links are in the description, so make sure you go give him a follow for the East Coast Rams. Marcos, any thoughts?
I agree with you, Ashton. We haven't been hitting our mid-round picks, so who better to tell us than the Rams, who constantly trade away their first-rounders or just hit on those second, third, and fourth-round picks. So I agree with you with that. Obviously, you guys can find me at Pancake Soul. I got the Twitter handle right here on my screen. That's on my X account and whatnot. I post clips here and there, or just give some rants and whatnot. I've been doing a lot of crashing out. I am planning to do a deep dive podcast. Not sure if it's going to be on the horizon or whatnot, but it is in the works that it's going to go over like not only film, but of extensively covering a very polarizing player that we just let go. So you guys keep an eye out for that, and basically.
Yeah, the Rams, for trading away their first round picks, they've done a really good job in the draft with the picks that they have kept, right? And that's one thing that the analysis really finds about them. So, here's hoping we can start to kind of nail some of those picks as well, and that we'll have a coach that can use them well. So listen, thank you guys both for being here, hanging out with us. It was fun having you both here. It was really interesting hearing both your perspectives. Make sure you follow Ashton and Marcos. Their links are, in the description below. And we'll be back next week with a couple other guests for Mock Draft Monday. So everyone be well. If you're on the East Coast, like a couple of us are, stay warm, stay safe, and everyone have a great week.